The alien world of Trine was loud with noise, light, and tension. In the heart of the city stood the arena, a tall circle of metal and stone, filled with thousands of alien watchers. They came not for games, but for something cruel. The arena was used to display captured species, to shame them, and then to make them fight that day. A new group of prisoners was brought in, strange beings from different worlds, all in chains, were pushed through the gates and into the lower chambers. Among them was a human man named Reed. He had short black hair, tired eyes, and strong shoulders. He looked calm, though his hands were tied and his clothes were torn. Reed said nothing. He only watched. The guards, tall, red-scaled aliens with sharp armor, pushed the prisoners into cells. They shouted commands in a language mixed with growls. The other prisoners looked down, scared and hopeless. But Reed kept standing tall. In the next cell was a young, beautiful woman named Mira. She was from a peaceful moon called Valari. Her skin was silver blue, and her hair flowed like a river at night. She had a soft, natural beauty and eyes that carried sadness. She wore a long robe with symbols of her people. She sat quietly, looking at the floor, her hands folded in her lap. The guards pointed at her. "She's next," one said in the alien tongue. "The crowd wants to see her." Mira heard them. She didn't move. The other prisoners looked away. No one wanted to speak. No one dared. But Reed's eyes stayed on Mira. A few moments later, the guards opened her cell and pulled her out. She stood without resistance. Though her hands trembled, they forced her forward and led her to the arena. "Lift!" Reed followed with his eyes. The lift rose slowly, taking Mira to the upper platform. A loud voice spoke above the crowd, announcing her like she was a prize. The lights hit her. The noise of thousands grew louder. Reed stepped forward in his cell. He could see the screen through the bars, showing the platform where Mira now stood. She looked so small compared to the wide stage and the tall guards beside her. The lead guard raised a hand and pointed at her robe. "Remove it," he said in the alien tongue. Mira froze, her head lowered. The crowd began to shout, laugh, mock. It was part of the show, part of the cruelty. They wanted her to feel shame. She stood still, her hands shaking. Then she looked up. Her eyes scanned the arena and somehow, through the camera or screen, found Reed's. His gaze was steady, calm, not curious, not mocking, just strong and quiet. She stared at him. Time seemed to stop. The crowd faded. The guards' voices fell into the background. All she could see was Reed. He didn't move. He didn't look away. His expression held no pity, but something else, respect. And in that moment, something inside Mira changed. She took a deep breath and straightened her back. The guards noticed. One of them stepped forward. Angry, he barked the command again. But Mira did not obey. She looked them in the eyes and took a single step back. The crowd went silent. Reed stood taller in his cell. His eyes never left her. She could feel his strength from a distance, as if it wrapped around her like armor. The guards were confused. They were used to fear. Not this, not calm refusal. One grabbed her arm, but Mira pulled it away. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any cry. The lead guard raised a stick of energy, threatening her. Before he could strike, a sound echoed from below. It was a loud crash, metal hitting metal. Reed had slammed his fist into the bars of his cell. The guard turned. Reed met his eyes. He didn't speak, but the message was clear. Enough. The silence in the arena grew deeper. Even the crowd seemed unsure. Mira slowly turned toward the edge of the platform and walked to the end, standing tall. She faced the thousands watching her and lifted her chin. She would not be shamed, and Reed would not allow it. The guards looked at each other. Something was wrong. The crowd, instead of cheering, began to murmur. Whispers turned into questions. Why had she refused? Why had the humans stepped forward? Why did they feel fear? The answer was simple. Because in that one moment, the crowd did not see a weak prisoner. They saw a young, beautiful woman who refused to break. They saw a human whose gaze could stop fear. They saw strength without weapons. The announcer tried to speak again, But the energy of the arena had shifted. Mira looked down at Reed through the screen, and Reed, silent and strong, looked back at her. The next moment would change everything, and it had only just begun. The silence inside the arena was strange, for a place always filled with cheers and cruel laughter. This quiet made the guards nervous. The crowd was watching, but no one knew what to say. Even the announcer stopped talking. Mira stood at the edge of the platform. The lights were bright, the air was tense, and the guards beside her still held their electric staffs. But she didn't step back. Her silver robe moved gently with the breeze. Her hands stayed at her sides. She didn't cover her face. She didn't cry. She looked calm. But her heart was beating fast. Down below, inside the prison level, Reed stood by the bars of his cell. His eyes remained locked on Mira. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't look afraid. Something about him made it hard to ignore him. One of the guards near Mira stepped forward again. He raised his voice in the alien tongue and pointed sharply at her robe. "Obey," he said, "or you will be punished." Mira turned slowly to face him. She didn't speak their language well, but she understood enough. Still, she said nothing. Instead, she looked past him, looked again toward Reed, and Reed, still calm, gave the smallest shake of his head. Not in fear, not in warning, but in quiet support, as if to say, "Asterisk, you don't have to obey them, as checked." The energy field near the lower fusion tunnels had been flickering all day. Rick stood beside the main panel, checking the heat levels. A faint pulse moved through the metal floor beneath his boots. Something was off. The readings did not match the models. He tapped on the control screen and sighed. If this continued, it could damage the whole coolant chamber. He opened his comm and called the control room. "Rick here. We've got pressure irregularities in Tunnel Ring 7. I need someone with clearance to run diagnostics from the inside." The voice on the other end replied quickly, "You'll have Varel. She's already nearby and monitoring Sector 3. She'll join you in 10 minutes. Rick paused before answering. Understood. He started gathering his tools. Working with Varel again was not a problem for him. She had sharp eyes, a sharp tongue, and a mind that never rested. Over the last few days, their arguments had become fewer. Their silence had become longer. She still stood tall with pride, but she no longer mocked him. Not since the night they shared heat in the tunnel. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. Varel stepped in. Her long coat brushed the floor, and her scanner device rested in one hand. "You requested help," she said. "Power flow is unstable again. Could be a core coil reacting to external surge buildup." Varel nodded without wasting time. They walked side by side into the deeper section of the tunnel ring. Dim lights glowed along the floor edges, while overhead pipes dripped quietly in the background. The station's heartbeat. Rick stopped near a junction box and pointed at the control module. "This section's not responding. We'll need to open the panel and scan it from inside." Varel crouched beside the panel and activated her tool. She didn't speak for a long while. Her hands moved smoothly, and her eyes focused hard on the screen. "You were right," she finally said. "Energy buildup is rising at an unnatural speed." "I had a guess," Rick said. "A correct one." She stood and looked at him for a moment. "You are quiet, but your silence is not empty," she added. Rick raised an eyebrow. "That was a compliment, I think." Varel didn't reply, but a faint trace of humor flickered in her expression. It was gone a moment later. They worked for another hour, carefully redirecting circuits and reinforcing the panels. The air grew warmer as they reached deeper into the fusion chamber. Warning signs flashed, but not in red. Not yet. They had time. Still, Rick kept one hand near the manual override. Suddenly, a heavy boom echoed through the tunnel. The floor trembled. A spark jumped from the wall behind them. "Energy spike," Rick shouted. "Systems overloading." "I see it," Varel said. Gripping a sidebar for balance, an alarm flashed on her scanner. The power regulator near the rear column had triggered a safety shutdown. But the force of the pulse had knocked loose a pipe above them. Rick looked up. Just as a burst of pressurized steam broke free, he grabbed Varel and pulled her back. The cloud hissed and filled the corridor with heat and mist. They fell hard to the floor. Rick landed first, then Varel on top of him. He felt her sharp elbow. Hit his side, but he didn't let go until the steam had cleared. You saved me again, she said softly. Rick coughed once and nodded. Just doing my job. She looked at him for a long moment, her face close to his. Then she stood up quickly and turned away. Rick sat up and caught his breath. The doors behind them had closed. Varel tried to open them manually, but they were locked. Systems in full lockdown now. We are sealed until reboot cycle ends. How long? Rick asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. Rick shook his head. Always during night shifts. They moved to a safer side of the tunnel and sat on the cool floor. There was silence for a while. The tunnel lights dimmed, switching to low power mode. Only a soft glow remained. Varel sat with her arms round her knees. She looked at Rick sideways. You speak very little, but your words stay in my thoughts longer than most. Rick smiled faintly. Maybe that's because I don't waste them. I once believed your kind was weak because you hold on to emotions, she said. Now I believe we are the ones who missed something important. Rick didn't answer right away. He looked at the steam pipe above them, still releasing slow mist. We feel things deeply. It hurts sometimes, but it also helps us connect. Helps us protect others. Varel looked at him again. Her voice was quieter this time. I used to think mating was about logic and choice. We match genes, we create new life, and we move forward. Simple. That's not how it works for us. Rick said, I know that now. They sat in silence for a long while. Then Varel leaned her head back against the wall. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. When I touched your skin that night, I felt something strange. Something inside me shifted. My body changed. Rick turned to her. I thought you were just cold. We needed warmth. I was cold, but something else happened. It felt like a thread was being tied. A thread I could not see. Rick didn't know what to say. He had no reason to believe anything unusual had happened that night. He had only tried to help. The lights above flickered again. Systems were rebooting. The doors clicked as they released. Varel stood slowly. She looked at Rick with a strange expression, one he couldn't name. We should finish the repairs, she said. Yes, Rick replied. Let's go. They walked out of the tunnel side by side. The mist behind them faded into the shadows. Neither of them noticed the small, blinking light on Varel's wrist scanner. A silent reading. A message meant for her alone. Genetic fusion detected status. Developing. Varel walked quickly through the long silver hallway of Station Numa, her mind full of noise. She had not spoken to Rick since the tunnel accident. That was 3 days ago. Every time she looked at her scanner, the result was the same. The same. Soft alert flashed across the small screen on her wrist. It was quiet. It was private. But it refused to go away. Genetic fusion confirmed status. Early stage development source. Human. Her steps slowed. She leaned against the wall and pressed her hand to her stomach. She felt no pain, no change. But she knew something inside her body had begun. Something impossible. Xerelians did not conceive without choice. They controlled when and how life was created. It was never an accident. It was never unplanned. But now she was carrying life, and the child was not just Xerelian. It was half human. She thought back to the moment in the tunnel. The shared warmth, the stillness. She remembered how Rick's arm had been around her shoulders to keep her warm. There had been no ritual, no ceremony, yet something powerful had passed between them. Varel closed her eyes. Impossible, she whispered. But her body did not lie dot the next morning. The station medical team called Rick to the clinic. He arrived wearing his usual gray jacket and utility belt. He looked tired but alert. Inside the small white room, he saw 3 faces to doctors and Varel. She stood near the wall, arms folded, not looking at him. Dr. Marn, the older human physician, stepped forward. Rick, we ran a full scan this morning. We were checking Varel after the tunnel incident. She felt some discomfort. We found something unexpected. Rick's face stayed calm. What is it? The doctor took a breath. Varel is pregnant, and based on the data, the child is hybrid. Silence filled the room. Rick glanced at Varel, but she still didn't look at him. He took a step forward. How? We're not sure, Marn said. There was no report of physical contact, but after studying the fusion patterns, we believe the genetic transfer happened during the thermal crisis. The heat, the pressure, the skin contact. Something triggered a biological response in her body. Varel finally spoke. It should not be possible. But it is, said the other doctor, a young Zarelian. This changes what we know. Rick stood quietly for a moment. What do you want me to do? The question made both doctors pause. Varel finally turned to him. You are not responsible, she said. You did nothing wrong. I know, Rick replied. But this still matters. Dr. Marr nodded. This news cannot stay private for long. The command will need to be informed. Varel walked out without another word. That same day, the station leaders called an emergency meeting. The command chamber was full of Zarelians, humans, and a few diplomats from nearby colonies. The room was quiet as Varel stood in the center, alone. Rick sat in the corner, eyes steady. The head of the council, a Zarelian named Sever, spoke first. Varel, do you accept that this development is the result of contact with a human? Yes, she answered. You were not forced, no. Then, explain. Why did you allow this to happen? I did not allow it. I did not expect it. It happened without intention. Murmurs filled the room. One diplomat stood up, angry. Then this is proof human biology is unstable. It reacts without control. It cannot be trusted. Rick stood. His voice was calm but firm. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I was sent to fix your systems. I worked hard. I followed your rules. I never crossed any lines. The room fell quiet again. Varel raised her hand and stepped forward. I once believed human behavior was weak. I mocked their ways. But over time, I began to see something different. I saw calm. I saw care. I saw someone who helped without asking for praise. I trusted him. She placed a hand on her chest. This child inside me is not a mistake. It is rare, strange. But it is also a sign that our two kinds are not so far apart. You may fear it now, but I do not. Council leader Sever looked at her. What do you intend to do? I will keep the child, Varel said, and I will protect it. The room was still. Then Sever looked at Rick. And you? Rick nodded. I stand by her. Days passed. The news spread across the station. Some Zarelians whispered in the halls. Some avoided Rick. Others came forward with questions, quiet and respectful. A few humans offered support. One young technician gave Rick a box of fruit and said, for the baby. Varel kept working. She still led science teams, still wrote reports, still adjusted energy systems. But something in her face had changed. It was softer now, more open. She stopped mocking the humans. She listened more. She and Rick rarely spoke in public, but some evenings, they sat on the quiet balcony near the outer ring, looking out at the stars. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat. One night, Varel said, I do not know what kind of mother I will be. Rick replied, you'll figure it out. You are calm in ways I still don't understand. It comes from doing hard things slowly, one at a time. She looked at him for a while. Then she nodded. In the station medical wing, the scans of the child continued. Its growth was faster than expected, but stable. It had features from both species. The doctors began collecting careful data, not for tests, but to understand. Some said the child could be the first of its kind, a symbol of something new. The spaceport lights shimmered across the station's large viewing window as Tom stood beside Velma. Her eyes stared ahead, watching the ship that would take them to her homeworld. She was calm, as always, but Tom could sense a quiet energy. Beneath her silence, she had invited him to her planet Velar Prime not as a visitor, but as a guest of honor. This was something no human had ever done before. Are you ready? Velna asked. Tom adjusted the strap on his shoulder bag and nodded. I think so. I packed a few things, snacks, a few books. She raised an eyebrow. Books, stories, he said. One of our oldest human customs, Vilna gave a slight nod of approval. Stories are welcome. They boarded the ship together. The crew was quiet and respectful. Every step Tom took felt like it echoed. He was the only human aboard, but Vilna walked beside him without hesitation, and that gave him confidence. As the ship left the station and entered deep space, Tom sat near a window and watched the stars pass by. Vilna joined him after a while. They spoke softly. She asked about his childhood. He asked about hers. She told him that as a young Velari, she had been trained in silence, discipline, and logic. There were no games, no bedtime stories, no emotional bonding with family, only purpose. When she asked him what it was like for humans, Tom described laughter around dinner tables, holiday gatherings, and how humans showed love not just with words but through gestures, small things like a hug or a pat on the shoulder. Do your people not fear losing control when they show feeling? She asked. Sometimes, Tom replied, but we believe emotion connects us. We feel more alive when we share it. Vilna thought quietly and said, that is what I wish my people to learn. The next day, the ship arrived on Velar Prime. From above, Tom saw sharp mountain ranges, wide silver oceans, and tall glowing cities that stretched in careful lines across the surface. The buildings were clean and perfect, almost too perfect. Everything was in order. Everything was quiet. When they landed, a group of Velari officials stood waiting. They bowed to Vilna but looked at Tom with curiosity. No one spoke to him at first. Vilna introduced him as a cultural instructor and led him through a tall glass corridor into the main city. The silence of the city was striking. People moved with smooth steps. No one shouted. No one laughed. The streets were clean. The air cool, but there was no music, no noise of children playing. It felt like a place of thought, not of feeling. Vilna brought Tom to a central hall where a group of young Velari had gathered. They were curious, quiet, and dressed in smooth gray robes. Vilna introduced them. These are the first of my people who volunteered to learn human customs. She said, they come with questions, they come with caution, but they are open. Tom smiled. That's enough. Curiosity is the first step. He began simply. He asked the group what they knew about Earth. Most had studied the facts, maps, science, languages, but not the emotions. They did not understand why humans danced when they were happy or why they cried during stories. Tom explained that feelings were like colors in the mind. They gave life depth and meaning. Then he showed them. He played a video of a human wedding, to people laughing, crying, and promising love in front of their families. The Velari watched closely. They asked many questions. What is a promise? What is joy? Why do others cry when someone else is happy? Tom answered every question with care. He didn't try to impress them. He just told the truth. Over the next few days, he taught them more. He showed them how to tell stories. He brought small drums and showed them rhythm. He asked them to try simple dances. At first, they were stiff. Their movements were slow, unsure. But something began to change. A young Velari named Lynn asked if she could try telling a story from her childhood. She stood before the group and spoke in clear words. She talked about walking alone across the northern bridges. The training continued across many days. Tom slowly became a familiar face among the Velari learners. Their stiff postures began to soften. Their voices became less flat, more alive. They still spoke slowly, carefully, but now their words held more feeling. Vilna watched everything closely. She did not join the lessons often, but when she did, she stood silently at the back, listening, observing. Her eyes always followed Tom, as if trying to understand something more than just what he said. One morning, Vilna sent a message asking Tom to meet her at a place called the Silent Room. The name made him curious. He had never heard of it. A small transport arrived to take him. It moved across long, smooth bridges that curved high above the city. The sky was pale blue, with soft clouds drifting across. Velari buildings stood tall and cold on either side, their glass walls reflecting perfect symmetry. The transport stopped near a quiet structure set apart from the others. It was simple, round, low, and built from white stone. not glass. Tom stepped out and saw Velna standing near the door. "This place," she said, "is only used by ambassadors. Few are allowed inside. I have received permission for you." Tom followed her into the building. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss inside. The silence was deeper than anything he had felt before. The walls were smooth, the floor polished. There were no decorations. No light came from outside. Only a soft glow from the ceiling above. Vilna led him to the center of the room where the seats faced each other. "Sit," she said. He sat down slowly. She took the other chair and folded her hands in her lap. "This is the place where Velari leaders speak honestly," she said. "Here, there is no formality, no titles, no silence that hides truth. What we say in this room stays here." Tom nodded, unsure of what to expect. Velna's voice softened. "I brought you here because I believe something has changed inside me." Tom leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" "I have lived a long time," she said. "I have made treaties, ended conflicts, and led missions across galaxies. I was taught not to feel. I followed that teaching. But your presence, your stories, and the way you explain emotions have awakened something I do not understand." Tom stayed quiet, listening. "I do not fear it," Vilna continued, "but I do not know what to do with it." Tom replied gently, "Maybe you don't need to do anything. Maybe it's enough to just feel it." She looked into his eyes. "That is not the Velari way. Maybe it." The square was full. Thousands of Velari had gathered, more than anyone could remember in recent times. The wind moved gently through the high white towers, carrying voices and light laughter. In the center, the speaking platform stood, where, one by one, Velari came forward to share how human customs had changed their days. Tom stood at the edge of the platform, watching. He wasn't speaking now. He had already said what he needed to say. Now, it was their voices that mattered. A young Velari woman stepped forward. "I used to go many cycles without speaking to anyone outside my work pod. But the human showed me how simple words, even shared food, make the world feel less cold." An old Velari, wrinkled and tall, said, "My family and I never walked together before. Now we sit each evening and speak about our dreams. I did not know that silence was a choice. Now, I choose to speak." The council members stood along the platform, listening. None of them interrupted. Vilna remained calm but alert. She knew this day could change everything. As the sun lowered behind the tallest dome, a child was helped up onto the speaking platform. The small Velari girl from earlier spoke softly. "When I am sad, I hug now. I learned that from the human." A soft murmur ran through the crowd. A few elders glanced at each other. Even they could not deny the shift. After the speakers stepped down, the High Council stepped forward. The oldest among them, his eyes slow and thoughtful, raised his hand. "We see the effects," he said. "They are real." Another council member added, "But there is fear too. We must ask what happens if our culture changes too quickly." Velna answered before Tom could. "Change has already begun. The question is whether we walk with it or try to hide from it. One leads to learning. The other leads to loss." The oldest elder nodded. "Then let the people vote." That evening, across the station and through all connected cities, the vote began. It was simple. Should human cultural exchange continue under Ambassador Velna's guidance? Should the human, Tom, be allowed to remain and continue teaching? For one full rotation, the system gathered responses. Velna returned to her residence and sat quietly beside the indoor pond. Tom stood nearby, pacing slowly. "Think they'll say yes?" he asked. Velna looked at the water's surface. "I believe they already have." When the result was announced, it was clear. 90% said yes. The people had chosen. The next day, the High Council made the results public. In front of a peaceful crowd, they declared, "We recognize the importance of understanding others. Ambassador Velna will continue her work. Tom of Earth will remain as cultural envoy. The human exchange program is now part of our official interspecies relations." Cheers broke out across the platform. Some clapped. Others raised their hands to the sky. Tom stood quietly as the moment passed over him. Then he felt a hand on his arm. Velna stood beside him. Her voice was calm, as always, but warmer now. "You have done more than you know," she said. "I only shared what I grew up with." Tom replied, "Sometimes the smallest custom lights. The darkest space," Velna said. He looked around at the Velari smiling, talking, connecting. For once, it felt like more than just a mission. It felt like a beginning. Later that night, after the crowd had left, Tom and Velna sat beneath the tall silver trees near the east garden. The sky above was full of soft stars. No words were needed. But then Velna spoke. "Tom, when you arrived, I thought you would teach jokes and simple hand gestures. But instead, you gave them something we forgot how to use." "What's that?" he asked. "Heart." Tom looked at her, then nodded. "Funny. That's what I feel like I found here too." For a moment, Velna looked away. The stars reflected in her eyes. "You could leave now," she said. "The mission is complete. Your part is done." Tom was quiet, or ass-checked.